From the arena to the front office, this is Scoreboard. I'm Chris Titley, and each episode brings you stories from the game of sport, where mindset, money, and meaning shape what comes next. Athletes, coaches, owners, and business leaders unpack the moments that matter, because the Scoreboard isn't just about winning, it's about life beyond the game. Now let's get to this week's episode. Hi, it's Chris Titley here, and on today's episode of Scoreboard, the podcast, I'm joined by Rachel Condos-Fields. Rachel, thank you so much for being part of this series, and finally we're doing a podcast together.
Oh, it's so exciting. Thanks, Chris. I've been listening to you interview lots of my athletes, and it's a real pleasure to be on this side of it for a change. Thank you.
Yeah, no, not a problem at all. And our relationship dates back probably, I don't know, 20 years maybe.
20 years, I'm going to say, 2 decades.
Well, I started in 2003 at Morgan, and you would have been maybe at Computershare then?
Yes, I certainly was.
Yeah, so I probably came to you with some help of some share purchase plans or something as a whippersnipper back in those days. But great to have you here. We're not going to talk Computershare and finance. We're talking sport on this podcast. This is what Scoreboard does. Rachel, your involvement with sport now.
Yeah, bit of a change to AGMs, dividend payments and capital raisings, that's for sure.
Sure is. And Wattlenest, your business, the Wattlenest. Can you want to talk about that, how that came about?
Yeah, so we're a relatively young company, Chris, but the first of its kind in Australia. So the idea came to me while I was at Computershare. I started becoming a bit of a go-to for athletes that were trying to transition to life after sport and needed some help commercialising their own brand or helping with their identification off the field. And I started hearing some horrific stories of hidden hardship across athletes and became a little bit more involved as a volunteer mentor for a number of athletes across a number of sports. And long story short, I started understanding that in Australia, many of our great talent, in fact, 70% of our best talent live on or below the poverty line. And in many instances, affordability was becoming a barrier for some great Australians to reach their full potential and represent on the international stage. And I just felt very strongly about doing something about it and becoming a bit of a voice and an advocate for those that didn't have the luxury of being broadcasted every week or being a household name, but they definitely had the talent. And that's how the Wattlenest was born. So we're 2 years old. We're a community of over 160 athletes across 50 different sports. We saw 37 Wattlenest athletes represent Australia at the Paris Games. And we're seeing what Gout's doing on the world stage too now. So it just proves that investment does matter and does make a difference.
Absolutely. Now, there's a couple of things I want to hone in on there. One is the transition from being an athlete, being in the spotlight, to finding their own identity post-sport. But then there's also, as you mentioned, current and emerging athletes that find it tricky to fund. And obviously, as you said, mentioned those stats around below the poverty line. I'm going to touch on the current athletes. Can you give the listeners out there a bit of an example of the financial barriers and hurdles, I suppose, of wanting to pursue your goal and be an elite athlete in your chosen sport?
Yeah, I have a gymnast in my program that I'll use as an example. Unfortunately, she didn't quite make the Paris Olympic Games as hoped, but her family had invested just over $80,000 into the 18 months leading up for her to chase that dream, and it just wasn't her time to shine. But that's just one story of the financial impact and then the heartbreak behind the scenes of not actually making it. There is a lot of qualification events that athletes need to go to just in order to be recognised and ranked on an international stage. And, these ranking points need to happen before they do have a name for themselves. And most of those competitions are abroad. So you could be looking at $4,000 alone just in air flights. You've got the uniforms, the accommodation, the competition fees. One of my emerging archers at the moment has just qualified to represent Australia in China and Canada later this year for archery, and it's going to set her back over $20,000 just for the privilege of representing her country. And they do it for the passion, and they're not out there crying poor or playing the victim, but it does come at a cost. And you can see quite quickly, for some people, those dreams just don't become a reality simply because of the affordability barriers and the financial stress it places on them and their families.
Yeah, and you mentioned about the numbers of athletes that you saw, participate in Paris from the Wattlenest. I think there's 40 odd sports represented at the Olympics. You're not sport specific. You're just athletes that are seeking different, types of different sports and types of different areas.
Yeah, that's right. So basically, if you've got the talent, the aspirations, the dream, and you're training at least $28,000, 28 hours a week and not getting funded, we're here to help as and when we can. The trouble with the Wattlenest at the moment is the athlete demand is going through the roof, and the corporate support and income just can't keep up with the pace of the athletes reaching out. On average, we get about 12 athletes every day pick up the phone or send us an email wanting some support. And in many instances, Chris, it might just be $600 to get on an aeroplane to go to Perth, for instance. So the level of support can vary, but we're about trying to give someone that opportunity as we can. The hardest thing about my job is saying no or saying we don't have the capacity, but we want to try and remove any barriers and give everyone the opportunity to be the best possible version they can.
2 years in, can you talk about the feedback that you've received? Now, obviously, there's a huge amount of supply in terms of athletes trying to ask for assistance. Can you talk about the feedback that you've got given thus far, and what sort of events and things that you're doing to help?
Yeah, so the feedback is what keeps you going, because at times you can think, why am I doing this to myself and the family? And, why don't I go and get a normal job? But it's the feedback that really keeps you going. Every now and then I will just look at my Instagram private messages or my emails, and I've often get heartfelt emails or comms from a parent or a coach. And when you start realizing the impact you've had, not just on the athlete, but on their support network and how much it means and what you've enabled them to do, it's a bit of a proud mum moment, to be honest. There is a really overwhelming sense of pride, and you just can't walk away from that. So the feedback has been extraordinary. When you talk to our major partners such as Horizon, Data3 and Cisco and Mullaney Dairy Farmers, Titles Queensland, Morgans and the Big Dry Friday, I think it's fair to say that they feel like it's definitely a two-way street. And even though they're there helping the athletes on their journey, their staff are feeling an overwhelming sense of connection and engagement. And some of those feelings and setbacks and overcoming adversity and all of those things our athletes are faced with, they're also very real feelings and challenges in the business world. So it's been a great opportunity for our athletes to also share the power of mindset and some of their performance mindset techniques and strategies with the corporate world. So it's definitely two-way. In terms of events, you know me, you've known me from my days at Computershare. I love connecting people and bringing people together. I love a good networking event. Every 3 months, we do hold roundtable events where we're bringing athletes and business leaders together. Our last one was last week at Victoria Park, where we co-hosted with the Honourable David Janetsky MP, who's Queensland Treasurer and Minister for Home Ownership and Minister for Energy. And it's just really wonderful to be able to connect influential leaders, business, government, community and sports together. And I have seen at some of these events organic relationships take place that has led to employment opportunities for our athletes as well. So the connectivity piece is really, really powerful. Our athletes don't just have their hand out. It's really wonderful to see them give back. We've spent a number of hours at the RSPCA. A lot of our athletes love animals and are very passionate about animal welfare. So we've done some days giving back there. We've gone and joined forces with the Coffee Brigade and served coffees to people that are facing homelessness and having very important conversations with people that might be feeling vulnerable or lonely. And it's really wonderful. The power of sport really does connect and unite and inspire and give people a sense of belonging. So it's more than just unleashing talent. It's about using the power of sport to build stronger, healthier and more inclusive communities.
Absolutely, Rachel. And you talk about the communities and talk about connections. There's lots of different stakeholders in your business, as you mentioned, from business owners and large corporate businesses to government, to the athletes themselves, to past athletes. How do you kind of connect them all? And I suppose leading into the 2032 games, how are we all going to sort of get that buy-in and all come together?
Yeah, it's a really good question. At the end of the day, we've got a humongous opportunity as a state to leverage off our very own home games. And it's really important that businesses are thinking now about how they can unleash their full potential and get economic uplift and being part of it. So we offer investment opportunities, large, small, and everything in between for people to feel a sense of connection to the 2032 games. And I think it's really, really important that as a community, we all lean in and we stop being negative and cynical about the infrastructure and start thinking about the legacy and the excitement that the Games is going to bring. I think there's been, unfortunately, too much whinging publicly and too much doubt. It is only 7 and a bit years away now. It's really time for us as a community to get excited and work together to unite, motivate, inspire, and really unleash the full potential that the Games is going to bring, not just our athletes, the community, but our business and the future generation of Queenslanders.
Let's touch on the athlete transition for a time. Then we talk about the Olympics. It's people's moment to shine. It's once every 4 years, and then maybe it's the career ending moment for some people. They're saying, I don't want to do another Olympic Games because it's 4 years out, and then they come out and they go into the real world. It's a bit of a problem, as you mentioned. How are you handling and how are you helping in regards to athletes transitioning outside of sport and maybe, a reframing of identity for them?
The transition is really tough. I've done a little bit of work in professional sport as well. And in all honesty, Chris, I think the transition's a little bit tougher for those that do have full funding because they're not forced to think about a career as much as our athletes. So there are some benefits of being self-funded and focused, because most of the athletes in my program, they train their 28 to 38 hours a week, but they're also forced to work just to cover the costs of their day-to-day living, and many of them are studying. So I think it's really important for these athletes to have two identities, but you can appreciate that when sport is such an integral part of your life, and the real hardship comes when you're unfortunately faced with injury, or you might be dropped from a team prior to your intentions, and that real sense of loss and finding your value outside of sport can be really overwhelming. So having that support network and the connectivity and the people that you can reach out to away from sport is absolutely crucial. And I like to think some of these roundtables and intimate events that we create foster a sense of companionship and support away from sport as well, so that when someone is facing a low, they can talk to a business connection or someone removed from the sporting environment just to have a bit of a heart-to-heart. It doesn't necessarily take the sting away, but it does make the transition feel a lot less lonely. I think we're kidding ourselves to say I've got the tools to take away that pain altogether, because there is going to be a low for every athlete that walks away from their sport, but it's about giving them the tools, the support network, and the community to help them get through that and navigate it.
Even over the last 2 years of your business, being a professional sports athlete at the high-performing level has probably changed a little bit with the increasing awareness of social media and building brand. And I was just having a chat on a previous podcast. They're talking about the don't do this, but do this, but then don't do this, because you've got conflicting messages from above in regards to building your own personal brand while you're a professional athlete. And then, obviously, networking, which is super important while your brand is, I suppose, at its peak. What do you tell your athletes in regards to the balance, I suppose, between doing extra laps and doing extra training sessions as opposed to going to a business function and networking?
I think people underestimate networking, and there's a genuine fear about it. And even when you do encourage people to network, Chris, experts like you and I are guilty of it ourselves. You go to a room and look for a face you know. That's not networking. That's talking to someone you already know. So I encourage my athletes to say yes to a networking event as and when they can. And I try and get them to do at least 4 that are out of their comfort zone every 12 months. And some of the tools I've given them is don't be the last person to arrive, which is what we all try to do. If an event starts at 6:30, we try and get there at 6:30 to avoid the awkwardness.
Casual, was it called casually late or casually?
Yeah.
Socially
I
late?
have found it is actually best to be the first in the room, and that's because the person that arrives second is forced to talk to you, and you're not then having to break into an awkward conversation or try and go out there to meet someone new. I can honestly say if you are the first in the room, you will have someone come and introduce themselves to you, and it just takes away some of those fears and paranoia around networking. And a lot of my athletes have taken that on board, and they're so proud they come home with a business card that's then generated a coffee catch-up. So I think it doesn't need to be as daunting as it needs to be. And I've told the athletes that there's no such thing as a bad coffee. Well, there is, but go and
literally a bad coffee, not a person. Yeah, that's right.
But if someone does offer to take you out for a coffee, you might say no the second time, but always say yes the first time, because you just don't know what that person has to offer and what you're going to learn. That's why you'll see me sitting in coffee shops so regularly during the week. I think it's really important that we connect with people. The simple reality and truth is, Chris, if I didn't have the relationships that I had built during my time at Computershare, and if I hadn't gone out of my way to build a network, the Wattlenest wouldn't exist, because the success of the Wattlenest has come down to relationships and trust and credibility, and you need to be able to invest in networking and people in order to get that.
I reckon you're spot on there, Rachel. Particularly with the if we get a good coffee brand out there, not only can they sponsor the Scoreboard, the podcast, they can help out with the Wattlenest. So if you're a coffee brand out there and you do good coffee, we love good coffee. No such thing as a bad coffee, as you mentioned, but there is.
Yeah,
so
there is, but not
we'll
if
give you
it's blend.
we'll give you a good plug. And I suppose from your athlete point of view, how do you encourage them, or at least kind of guide them when it comes to things like LinkedIn and social media and TikTok, etc.?
Yeah, you'll see most of my athletes will use Instagram, but very few will use LinkedIn. And I think they're missing an opportunity there. That's where their next chapter is going to begin. And the sooner they embrace the power of corporate connectivity, the easier that transition is going to be. I'm certainly not savvy when it comes to Instagram or TikTok. I don't even have a TikTok account, to be frank, but I do try to get out there on Instagram. But it's going to be LinkedIn that helps them with their future careers and meet the right people that will navigate them post-sport, absolutely. But you can only guide them at the end of the day.
Yeah.
They're all adults and they can make their own decisions and choose to take or ignore the advice that's given to them. But I also understand that social media can be draining and can be an unhealthy distraction at times as well, because you do find yourself glued to the phone, checking how many likes you've got, what your engagement is, resharing, posting, who has and hasn't liked it. So I understand as well the fear is around it becoming an unhealthy addiction and an unhealthy distraction. But like everything in life, Chris, you need to find that perfect balance.
Yep, like chocolate and other things. You need to make sure that it doesn't dictate your life, and you have excess consumption. And you're spot on there in terms of instant gratification. People, I don't know how people that get maybe they turn it off, or they get thousands and thousands of likes on a post. I mean, it hasn't happened to me just yet, but I'd imagine if you had your notifications on, it'd be pretty annoying. Rachel, I'm curious to know what Nirvana looks like for you. What does the Wattlenest need? What's the plan over the next sort of coming years? And if we sat here and did this podcast in a couple of years' time leading up to the Olympics, what would you like to see with the business and its growth?
Yeah, at the end of the day, I'd like to let the community know that affordability isn't a barrier, and I want to make sure that our future generations aren't deterred from chasing their sporting dreams just because they think that they can't afford it or because they're putting pressure on their family, etc. So I want to be able to, in my lifetime, know that affordability isn't a barrier for anyone to represent Australia on the international stage. And we talk about health equality, but there needs to also be equality in sports as well. I see too many times that sometimes the haves are getting spots on teams as opposed to the have-nots. And I've got children that play sport, and I can see already how much club sport costs. And then when they're picked for a state team, and then all of those things, it just becomes, a little bit of a divide. And then we need to see more equity and equality in terms of sports and participation. But in terms of the Wattlenest, I honestly would like, and I believe that we're on the right track to being there, the single most largest funder of athletes in Australia. And that's our goal. And I think we've made, in such a short period of time, good headways getting there. We've provided hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars in direct athlete funding. We've enabled countless opportunities for employment and connectivity. We've brought over 2.2 million Australians together through a 55 episode TV series called For the Glory. And, for a idea that only came up a couple of years ago. I'm really, really proud of what we've done. And this is just the beginning, and the best is yet to come. But we really do rely on our corporate partners. Without them, there is no us. And, we can't do this alone. It's a team effort, and we need the support.
Well, you should be very proud of your progress thus far, and I hope that some listeners out there will understand and listen to this podcast and somehow reach out to you
and make a difference. You did touch on that point around the expense of children participation in sport, particularly playing multiple sports. My 3 kids play multiple sports, and it's term and it's regularly. I'm wondering how much, like, I suppose that is in terms of the amount of dollars spent as parents in Australia, and secondly, like the ease of registration and tech, and I suppose the ability for people to sign up and play. Have you looked at that segment, I suppose, and is there something there to kind of help and improve participation at a grassroots level?
There's definitely a massive gap there, and it definitely needs focus and attention. I just know that I can't fix it single-handedly. It's a much bigger problem than what the Wattlenest can take on. My greatest concern when I lay at bed at night and celebrate what the Wattlenest has done, the athletes that reach out to us are in all honesty, quite lucky. They have heard about us. They're in metro cities or in environments where they've been referred to the Wattlenest. I'm concerned that if you go out to the real regional areas of Australia where they don't even know the Wattlenest exists and they haven't had the luxury of the 4-hour lift to their state selection program to even shine or have the opportunity to show Australia what they're made of. It's, if I could have a magic wand, that's the next thing I'd like to fix, is making sure that geographic boundaries are not barriers either. So affordability is one thing, but I grew up in country coastal Victoria, down the bottom of the Great Ocean Road in a beautiful place called Portland. And now that I'm a proud Queenslander and have lived in Brisbane for so long, I can see the differences in opportunity that's available to these country kids versus the city kids as well. And that's another problem that I would love to tackle at the moment. It's just getting people where they need to be. But it's, I'd be kidding myself if I didn't say we have a much broader problem.
Yeah, no, for sure. Now, having all these athletes in and around you and then running a business yourself, what are the similarities and what are you getting out of meeting some of these athletes and some of the things that you obtain from their learnings and their traits to kind of run your own business?
Yeah, I think athletes honestly make the best employees. They are reliable, they're dedicated, they have made tremendous sacrifice, they're results driven, and they're team orientated. They have the ability to get up off the ground when things don't go wrong. And I just think, based on my 20 years in corporate world, some of these skills are lacking from the boardroom or lacking in executive decision making policies and things. We can learn a lot from the grit, determination, and the power of the mindset of these athletes, and their skills are definitely transferable into the workforce. And when you look at C-suite females in Australia, 96% of female C-level executives have played sport. So you can see firsthand the connection between sport and fostering confidence and fostering inclusion. And I know that there's a lot of conversations around the gender gap, but I do think sport is part of that solution, because sport creates healthy, positive, confident, reliable, ambitious people. And it's like all of society benefits when people are playing sport.
I think there's a material benefit of children playing sport, and I almost that it's underestimated in regards to other issues around physical well-being, mental well-being, etc., which I hope more people do study on, and the ability to get outside and be part of a team. And even if it's not even if you're an individual sport, you're probably part of a broader team somewhere along the lines there. Rachel, I'm going to ask you, which I ask some of my guests in the podcast, the scoreboard moment, which is a moment in your life which is almost like a snap where you can go back to your life and say, I remember that moment, and it sort of changed directions and changed paths.
Yeah, so I've had quite a number of scoreboard moments, and I'm going to tell you about one, I think, but there's 3 leading up to it that gets to that one. So you're going to have to just forgive me as I talk through it. But Chris, when I was in year 11, one of my best friends was killed in an accident, and that was a real life-changing experience for me. I was overcome with a variety of emotions: anger, frustration, grief, disappointment, hopelessness, but also a sense of drive. Once I got through the grieving motion, I decided to go to Nepal as a 17-year-old for 4 months and participate in a volunteer program that saw me help establish a school in the Golconda region of Kathmandu. And I lived in host families and did a lot of work in some very remote and rural villages. During that time, the school had just opened and we had 20 students, and I was walking to school from the bus stop every day, and there was one boy in particular, a young boy, his name is Sukra Shrestha. He was 6 at the time, and he used to say to me every morning with a big smile, "Good morning, auntie, good morning, sister." And I was only 17. I remembered the impact that this good morning had on me profusely. I looked forward to it every day, and he looked forward to seeing me every day. And he watched with envy as the other kids all went to school in their school uniform. I worked at the Middle Park Bakery, $8 an hour back then. My friends were getting $6 an hour, so I thought I was a millionaire and living the life. But worked at Middle Park Bakery, $8 an hour, and I discovered that I had enough funds to send this boy to school. It was $600 a year. And while I was there, I decided I was going to put him through and give him the opportunity of education, which I did. So it was really rewarding. I was there for his first day of school. So fast forward, I was going to Nepal every year for 4 months at a time, and I could see, the power of education and the ability that it gave Sukra to integrate. And I also saw the power of sport. Sport was something that spoke every language. It didn't discriminate and gave everybody in the community a sense of belonging. And I could see when the white foreigner came that couldn't speak Nepali, if you brought out a soccer ball, all of a sudden everyone was your friend and you could all communicate and connect and talk. So I saw back then at a young age in my life the power of sport to integrate, bring a sense of belonging and connection. Anyway, I stayed very connected to the cause. I'm now a non-executive director for the organisation, but I've been involved, since 1999 and very proudly. The scoreboard moment that I'll share with you is a couple of years ago. I took Jamie Young, who at the time was a goalkeeper for the Brisbane Roar, back to Nepal with me so that we could do a sports carnival for 6 days and bring some disadvantaged villages together and unite through the love of football. But I turned up to the airport and I'll never forget the emotions that I experienced. But Sukra, the boy I met on the side of the road, picked me up from the airport. He surprised me. He picked me up in a car that he had owned himself and drove me back to his family house that he had funded for his family. And it was just a real moment in my life, Chris, where I realized you can't change the world, but your actions can definitely change it for one person. And it's just a pinch me moment where I had gone from seeing this boy live in, pretty tough conditions to picking me up, driving a car and taking me to a home he had bought his family. And it just, real moment. I'm really pleased to say Sukra now lives in Australia in Corinda with his wife, and it's just magical and amazing. So without going into too much more detail, that's probably one of my scoreboard moments.
Oh, absolutely! What a tremendous moment, and full circle, and obviously the years of lead up and little presses of button, little touch points, etc., to lead to where you are now. I'm curious as to know what prompted to take a high performing athlete over to Nepal.
Yeah, well, I had done a lot of work here in Australia with Jade North, who I think you've interviewed on the Scoreboard as well.
Yep.
Where we were.
Oh, no, not on the Scoreboard, in a previous life, but back at Morgan. Okay. So yes, yep.
So Jade North, I was doing a little bit of work with him, and we were using footballers as a connect with Indigenous communities. And I just thought, how special is this? I want to go and replicate this model and do something special in some of the world's most disadvantaged communities. So since taking Jamie to Nepal, Hugh McCluggage from the Brisbane Lions has also joined World Youth International and went over and used his love of both sport and music to connect and create opportunities, inspire and empower. And admittedly, we took a few AFL footies over with us, but they soon turned into soccer balls and they were more interested in playing cricket. But it was a real powerful opportunity. And as I've said time and time again, sport, honestly, it speaks every language, does not discriminate, and it gives the most disengaged people a sense of belonging and gives them pathways and gives them hope. So, the power of sport is just, simply unique and unmatchable.
And Rachel, these athletes do have an off season. There is a little bit of downtime, I suppose. And would you encourage more athletes to try and actually go overseas and get away from it all, but actually sort of make a difference, a subtle difference, and which can make a big difference over the longer term to actually go and see some of these communities and areas to help?
100%. Not only will it change and transform the lives of many in the communities, it will change and transform their life. The lessons and the perspective I have personally gained out of spending so much time with the most vulnerable communities in the world, you can't learn that or experience it any other way. And I think it's made me a better mum, a better wife, a better employee, a better citizen. And there's just, when you're having your lows or you're having some tough moments, that experience gives you so much more perspective. And I think it just gives you a lot more empathy and the ability to look at challenges and tackle struggles with a completely different lens.
Well, there you go. Any athletes or current athletes or past athletes out there listening should contact Rachel. Rachel, I'm going to ask you about your favourite all-time sporting moment now.
Really good question. It certainly wasn't when Parramatta Eels lost the grand final a few years ago to the Panthers. That was probably one of the saddest sporting moments I've experienced in my lifetime. But I'm sure you've got this answer from everyone, but the World Cup, I was part of the...
No, I haven't. You're the first, and I've been waiting for this moment because it was one of my moments too. And I secretly keep my moments. There's lots of moments that I've suggested, but this is one. Finally, we get there.
Well, the World Cup, we saw what it did to Australia, but also in Brisbane, I was part of the crowd at Suncorp Stadium for that quarter final where Courtney Vine took the 10th penalty shootout kick and won us the game. But I just remember the intensity. The crowd was going crazy, the goosebumps, the tears. It was the first time I've been at a sporting event and actually felt sick in the stomach with nerves and anxiety. And then you go from getting out of your seat and cheering, uncontrollably when I'm not usually the crazy person at a sports stadium, but it just brought out all of the emotions. And looking around, the stadium was electric and alight. And for me, that was a moment I won't forget. And
it was so good. I was at the Gabba, right? And the AFL was on, and it was three-quarter time. I think we were playing Adelaide, and I was with my son, and I was like, "No, we got to go. We've got to go and watch this." And we started watching it on the big screen at the Gabba instead of the AFL. I'm sorry, AFL, but that particular night it was a world game. It was a world moment, and we ended up getting a taxi home. And we just got home at the start of the shootout with our neighbours and all of our neighbours together watching it. It was just unbelievable. I'm getting goosebumps talking about it, but such a pivotal moment for women's sport, pivotal moment for the Matildas, and also being close to home here in Brizzy as well. But Rachel, that's awesome. Courtney Vine, what a tremendous moment that was. I also remember John Aloisi back in 2006, showing my age, getting us into the World Cup.
Into the World Cup,
Into the World Cup, not being into the World Cup. One final question for you, Rachel. You see lots of athletes. You work with lots of athletes and past athletes, etc. What's some advice to someone who's, and you've had children as well, what's some advice to young kids out there that want to be athletes and want to grow up to become high performers in their particular field?
Yeah, I know that everyone says it, but it's about staying true to yourself. There's so many negative distractions out there for youth, and being a teenager is really, really tough at the best of times. And it's quite easy to be distracted and taken away from something you love just to fit in or feel the pressure of socializing or the whole FOMO and fear of missing out kind of concept. So my biggest advice is stay true to yourself and follow your passions and your dreams, and know that the people that love you most are the ones that are going to be there for you and support you through thick and thin, and just stay focused. It's easier said than done, and having two teenage kids, I can see the struggles that parents face, and we know that 80% of girls drop out of sport at the age of 16. And, my kids are both still actively playing, but there have been moments where I've thought, oh, God, we're going to be one of those statistics next. Friendship.
It's very real, isn't it?
Socialization are taking over, but it's really tough. It's just you've got to just follow your dreams and be true to yourself and try and stay focused. But it's really, really tough for kids out there.
Yeah, no, I'd imagine that. And also just on touching on the Wattlenest in terms of support networks, I mean, this is a network of support. This is a network of other sports people, of athletes, of corporates, etc., which I think is, underestimated in terms of its critical nature. And I was chatting to a number of athletes, obviously, on Scoreboard, talking about their support network, that they basically get, maybe the odd text message if they lose, maybe from their parents and maybe from their brothers or sisters, etc. But then when they win, they get 25 text messages, etc. But we need to even up the ledger to make sure that these people are supported. And building a community like the Wattlenest not only can provide financial support, but it can also provide emotional support.
Yeah, it's a really, really important point you've just raised, Chris, because if you imagine the pressure on the shoulders of these athletes, you think about the Olympians and Paralympians in our network. They've come to us, we've given them funding. So already they feel a sense of guilt if they don't perform, which they shouldn't, because there's no pressure from us at all. But you can just imagine the oh, shivers, I've taken money off someone, I better better get the results that I'm out to achieve.
Yeah, otherwise they might look at me and go, "Oh, money down the
that was a
drain."
waste of money, which is not the case at all. Leading up to that, they've had parents and carers and coaches sacrifice 90% of their weekends every week for years to give them the opportunity to be where they are. They've had, just people backing them. So when they do get to the Olympic qualifiers, there's all of a sudden an overwhelming sense of guilt. And unfortunately, you do see some people not make it. And that puts a lot of pressure on them when they know how many people have tried to support them and get them along the way. And you don't realize the mental health issues that our athletes face as a result of that disappointment. It's not just the disappointment in themselves. They've got this fear and overwhelming sense of guilt of letting down the support network around them. So you're absolutely right. It's really important that we are there for the athlete, the whole athlete, not just there to celebrate their victories and give them a high five when they've had success. There are more lows than highs in sport. For every person that you see represent Australia on the Olympic Games, there are another 20 people in the background crying because they've missed out. So it's really, really important that we don't just celebrate the wins, but we provide that support network for the athlete the whole cycle of their career.
Yeah, no, Rachel Condos-Fields, thank you so much for being part of the Scoreboard, and I hope the Scoreboard, the podcast itself, can do that and can help with connections and networks, and you've been a great friend over the last 20 years, and I look forward to continuing to support the Wattlenest where I can, and looking forward to catching up on your progress. Thanks so much for being part of this series.
Thank you, Chris. It's been a pleasure. Good luck. Can't wait to hear who's next.